What if I told you there is a fully functioning country, like complete with its own borders, government, and, a really deep national identity that is actually smaller than a rural U.S. town?
It's a completely wild concept.
Right. I'm your host, and welcome to today's deep dive. Because most of us have this mental model of nations as these vast, sprawling landscapes, you know? You fly over them for hours or you drive across them for days.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so excited to be here, by the way. But yeah, we're so conditioned to think of countries as massive pieces of land.
Exactly. But today we're doing a deep dive into this really fascinating source article. It breaks down 6 tiny countries that you can literally walk across between breakfast and dinner.
Yeah.
And the mission here is to just completely shatter the illusion that countries have to be, endless.
It really forces a total recalibration of how we understand geography and, well, sovereignty in general.
Yeah.
Because when you strip away that massive acreage that usually defines a nation, you are left looking at the pure mechanics of survival.
That makes total sense.
Our sources today highlight this fascinating phenomenon, really. When you shrink the physical borders of a country down to just a microscopic footprint, the history, the culture, the geopolitical significance, it all just becomes incredibly dense.
Like hyper-concentrated. And that is exactly what we're going to explore for you today. What does it actually mean to be a nation when your homeland is just a literal speck on the map?
It's such a great question to dig into.
And looking at the source material, I noticed a distinct pattern in how these places managed to exist. So we should probably start with the first category the article brings up, which is the mountain holdouts.
Ah, yes. The fortresses.
Right. We're looking at 2 European micronations that have basically managed to survive the centuries by acting as literal geographical fortresses.
That geographical aspect is the crucial mechanism here. I mean, when you lack the military numbers or the vast resources of an empire, your physical terrain has to do the heavy lifting for your defense.
You just let the rocks do the work.
Exactly. Geography essentially becomes your primary diplomatic tool.
So let's look at Liechtenstein first. The source actually calls this one the giant of the list, which is highly ironic.
Yeah, giant is definitely a relative term here.
Very relative, because it clocks in at a mere 62 square miles. It's tucked right between Switzerland and Austria, and it actually contains part of the Alps. Specifically, I think it's the Ratican Mountains.
Yeah, that's right.
So you've got about 40,000 German-speaking residents living in this incredibly compact, super mountainous terrain.
To help you visualize 62 square miles, just picture a square that is barely 8 miles long and 8 miles wide.
Wow.
For a modern nation-state, that is virtually nothing. But those mountains are the key. They provide this sheer natural barrier. You don't really need a massive standing army to defend your borders when your borders are literally made of formidable alpine rock.
Right. Nobody's marching an army over that easily. And what's wild to me is that it's not just some rugged wilderness. The source describes a place that is just dripping in fairy tale aesthetics.
Oh, completely.
Like, you can hike across the whole thing, and along the way you're passing these pristine cathedrals and actual stone fortresses.
And the castles.
Yes. The centerpiece is Vaduz Castle. And this isn't some historical museum with velvet ropes and a gift shop. The actual Prince of Liechtenstein still lives there.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It's a fully functioning royal residence in a country you could just trek across in a single afternoon.
It's an unbroken continuation of medieval power structures. Because the terrain kept them isolated and protected, they never really went through the massive boundary-erasing conquests that homogenized so much of the rest of Europe.
They just kind of sat it out.
Basically, yeah. But as compact as Liechtenstein is, it looks like a sprawling empire compared to the next fortress on our list.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought up San Marino, because this one, it genuinely breaks my brain.
It's a logistical marvel.
It really is. It is only 24 square miles. And unlike Liechtenstein, which is at least wedged between 2 different countries, San Marino is completely engulfed by Italy.
Completely surrounded.
Yeah, it is a total enclave home to just 33,000 people.
The timeline is what makes San Marino a true geopolitical anomaly, though. The source notes it is actually the oldest republic in the world.
Wait, in the world?
In the world, boasting 17 centuries of history. They have been fighting for and maintaining their independence from the surrounding Italian territories since the 4th century.
Let's just stop and unpack the mechanics of that, because 1,700 years is almost impossible to fathom.
It really is.
Think about San Marino surviving inside Italy. Like, like an independent family-run coffee shop successfully operating right in the middle of a giant corporate mega mall for 17 centuries.
That is a fantastic analogy.
Right. The mall around it keeps expanding, changing management, they remodel, rebrand, and this one tiny shop just refuses to be bought out or assimilated.
They just keep brewing their own coffee.
Exactly. But how does a 24-square-mile enclave actually maintain a distinct sovereign identity while entirely swallowed by a cultural powerhouse like Italy?
It comes down to a really highly calculated mix of physical isolation and diplomatic leverage. Again, they function as a mountain fortress.
Right. Mount Titano, I think.
Yes. But beyond the stone, they employed this brilliant strategy of non-threat and strict neutrality.
They played it safe.
Very safe. The source points out that their sovereignty was acknowledged by major historical figures who otherwise conquered literally everything in their path.
Whoa.
Yeah, Napoleon himself acknowledged San Marino. They managed to make themselves more valuable as a neutral, stable micro-republic than as conquered territory.
That's incredibly smart.
It was a very long diplomatic game.
Yeah.
And it culminated in 1862 when Italy finally officially recognized them as an independent republic.
It's just a masterclass in flying under the radar while projecting just enough authority to stay autonomous.
Absolutely.
And the reality of visiting it today presents this hilarious contrast. The source mentions that because the country is so small, visitors basically have to choose between two completely different experiences for their day trip.
Oh, I love this detail.
Right. You can either explore the ancient medieval towers that literally kept the country alive for centuries, or you can go to San Marino Adventures, which happens to be the largest adventure park in Italy's lands.
It perfectly encapsulates the modern microstate economy, doesn't it?
It really does.
You have the profound weight of a 1,700-year-old republic coexisting right alongside zip lines and ropes courses.
Yeah.
It shows how these nations have to constantly adapt and, well, monetize their limited space to remain economically viable today.
Yeah, they have to pay the bill somehow.
Exactly.
So we've been talking about borders made of stone, these unmovable fortresses that have stood the test of time. But the source material takes a really sharp turn here.
It's a very sobering pivot.
It is. We move away from Europe out into the Pacific Ocean to look at two micronations whose borders are entirely defined by the sea. And this is where I have to strongly push back on the framing of the original article.
The whole travel blog tone, I assume.
Yeah.
Yes. The article pitches this entire concept as a quirky travel challenge, like get your steps in, see a whole country in a day.
Yeah, it's a bit tone deaf.
Super tone deaf. Because when you read the actual facts presented about Tuvalu and Nauru, this isn't a breezy vacation itinerary. It's a ticking clock.
The contrast between the lighthearted premise of the article and the stark geographic reality of these two nations is really jarring.
It is.
Mountains offer centuries of static protection. The ocean does not.
Let's look at the logistics of Tuvalu. It's located north of Fiji, and it's not a single landmass. It's a chain of 9 coral atolls.
Right.
When you combine all 9 of those islands, the total landmass is just 10 square miles. And the capital, Funafuti, is only 0.9 square miles.
Less than a single square mile for a national capital.
It's tiny.
And the mechanics of living on a coral atoll dictate everything about their survival. An atoll is essentially a ring of coral reef. That means the soil is incredibly poor. They cannot sustain large-scale agriculture.
And even more alarming, the source notes they have 0 fresh water.
No.
Think about the infrastructure required to keep 11,400 residents alive when you cannot pump water from the ground. They have to rely entirely on elaborate rain-catching systems and just a constant stream of foreign imports just for basic survival.
This is the extreme vulnerability of the oceanic microstate. When your borders are that small and your natural resources are virtually non-existent, sovereignty becomes a very fragile concept.
Yeah, it really does.
You are entirely at the mercy of global supply chains and, of course, the climate.
Which brings us to Nauru, located just northwest of Tuvalu, about 25 miles south of the equator.
Right.
Nauru is the smallest island country on Earth, and it's the 3rd smallest country overall. It's just 8.5 square miles.
That's incredibly small.
To put that in perspective for you, the source mentions Nauru is so small it doesn't even have an official capital city.
Well, how do you establish a separate capital district when your entire country is the size of a large airport?
You really can't.
The whole island essentially functions as one continuous decentralized settlement.
But the truly staggering detail about Nauru is its lifeline. It gained independence from Australia in 1968, but it is one of the most westernized countries in the South Pacific.
Right, they speak English in Noria.
Exactly. And a full 90% of their food and other imports come directly from Australia.
That statistic right there is the core of their vulnerability. Importing 90% of your necessities isn't just an economic quirk, it is a massive structural dependency.
It's a tether.
It raises profound questions about what independence actually means. If a larger neighbor can effectively turn off your food supply by just halting shipping routes, your sovereignty is largely theoretical.
And that dependency is shadowed by the ultimate threat, which the source doesn't hide, despite the breezy travel pitch. Both of these tropical landscapes are literally sinking.
Yeah, it's happening right now.
Rising sea levels and climate change are actively shrinking Tuvalu year by year. The article states plainly that without major intervention, Nauru will be completely underwater.
It's an existential crisis playing out in real time. The very isolation that defined these nations is now actively consuming them.
It's terrifying.
The source explicitly mentions that Tuvaluans have already begun emigrating, recognizing that by the end of the 21st century, their homeland will likely be completely submerged.
It's just completely heartbreaking. You are looking at the physical erasure of an entire sovereign nation within our lifetimes.
Yes.
It really strips away the luxury most of us have of taking the ground beneath our feet for granted. We treat land as a permanent fixture. But for Tuvalu and Nauru, land is temporary.
It really forces a very difficult realization about nationhood. But, if we move from these isolated islands facing total physical erasure, we arrive at the final two nations in our source stack.
Right.
And they represent a reality that is the exact opposite of disappearing.
Oh, absolutely. The last two nations on this list are the absolute smallest in terms of square mileage, but they aren't fading away. They are hyperdense powerhouses.
They really are.
They are projecting massive global influence from microscopic footprints.
They represent the absolute extremes of wealth, density, and institutional power. If the first two survive by mountains and the second two are threatened by the ocean, these final two survive through abstract concepts.
Which are?
Extreme capital and religious authority.
Okay, let's start with the capital. Monaco.
Right.
It sits right on the French Riviera, sharing borders with France and the Mediterranean Sea. And the physical space is almost impossibly small. It's 0.77 square miles.
It's tiny.
Yet the population is roughly 31,800 people.
We need to pause on that density for a second.
Yeah.
You are packing nearly 32,000 residents into roughly 3/4 of a square mile.
It's insane.
In a typical urban environment, that level of density often correlates with severe infrastructure strain or, poverty.
Right, but Monaco is the polar opposite of a struggling city. It is defined by extreme concentrated wealth.
Unimaginable wealth, really.
It's famous for the Monte Carlo casino. There are massive mega yachts permanently docked in Port Hercule, and they literally shut down their own streets to run the Formula One Grand Prix.
Yeah, the street circuit.
But I have to ask about the logistics here. You can't just pack 32,000 millionaires and billionaires into less than a square mile without the infrastructure completely collapsing. How does a place like that actually function on a daily basis?
The only way to survive that level of density is through hyper-engineering.
What do you mean?
Well, I like to think of Monaco as a luxury cruise ship permanently docked on land.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Every single inch of space is meticulously designed to maximize revenue and exclusivity. When you don't have outward space, you build vertically. You build underground. And you reclaim land from the sea.
Wow, they literally build out into the ocean.
Exactly. The entire nation operates like a highly managed VIP resort, where all basic necessities are seamlessly imported, so the illusion of pristine wealth is never broken.
The luxury cruise ship analogy makes total sense. It explains how they handle the sheer logistics of life without any actual land to farm or build standard utilities on.
It's an engineered reality.
The source even throws in a great cultural touch point, referencing that old ABBA song.
Right.
Noting that a visit to Monaco is a stark reminder that, quote, it's a rich man's world.
It is the ultimate manifestation of borders defined by wealth. But remarkably, even at 0.77 square miles, Monaco is almost 3 times larger than our final destination.
That's so hard to believe.
The absolute smallest country on Earth.
Vatican City, clocking in at 0.27 square miles.
0.27 square miles, and it is entirely landlocked within the city limits of Rome, Italy.
Yeah.
It has a permanent population of only 500 to 1,000 residents.
Think about your own neighborhood for a second. If you walk a few city blocks to go to the store, you've probably walked a quarter of a square mile.
Easily.
I want you to visualize taking that exact same short walk, but inside Vatican City. In those few blocks, you have crossed an international border, you have walked past some of the most world-altering art ever created, like the Sistine Chapel and St. Peter's Basilica, and you are standing at the absolute center of Catholicism.
The contrast in scale versus influence is unparalleled.
It really is.
If Monaco is the exclusive VIP cruise ship, Vatican City operates like a global corporate headquarters that has managed to carve out an untouchable sovereign realm right in the middle of a foreign capital.
Right. In Rome.
It projects power to over 1 billion followers worldwide, all from a plot of land smaller than most golf courses.
But just like San Marino, that sovereignty wasn't just politely handed to them, was it? The source mentions this was the result of intense historical friction.
Oh, far from it. The existence of Vatican City as we know it today is the direct result of centuries of tension.
Really?
Yes, the Italian government and the Papal States spent centuries locked in territorial and political conflict. It wasn't until 1929 that Italy finally relented and formally recognized Vatican City's absolute sovereignty.
That's fairly recent, all things considered.
It is. They essentially realized that recognizing this tiny sliver of independent land was the only way to resolve the massive political headache of hosting the Pope's seat of power.
It's wild to think that crossing a street in Rome means you are stepping out of Italian jurisdiction and into a distinct nation born from centuries of religious and political fighting.
Just a few steps across a white line on the ground.
And you can do the whole tour before lunch.
Which brings us back to the core premise of our source material. We've looked at 6 wildly different microstates today. And I think the unifying insight here is that a country is clearly not defined by its acreage.
No, definitely not.
Nationhood is not a measurement of physical space.
Then how do we define it based on what we've learned today?
It is fundamentally about a shared narrative and an absolute refusal to be absorbed by the giants next door.
I love that.
Right. Liechtenstein and San Marino survived by leveraging their mountains. Monaco built an invisible wall of immense wealth. Vatican City leveraged the weight of global religion.
And Tuvalu and Nauru.
They relied on the vast isolation of the ocean. The mechanisms differ, but the result is the exact same. A concentrated identity that insists on its own independence.
That concept of a shared narrative brings me right back to the darkest reality we discussed today regarding Tuvalu and Nauru.
Yeah, the sinking.
The source makes it devastatingly clear that by the end of the 21st century, Tuvalu will likely be completely submerged. The land will be gone, and its people are already packing up and scattering across the globe.
The physical borders we've been talking about walking across will simply cease to exist.
Right. And that leaves me with a final lingering question for you to mull over today. If a tiny nation's physical land completely disappears beneath the ocean, but its surviving people are still out there holding on to their history, their language, and their culture, does that country still exist?
A heavy thought.
It really is. Can a nation survive as a purely conceptual state living entirely in the minds of its people when there are literally no borders left to walk across?